think you do.
Stanley. Yep, looks like we've got everybody on board.
All right. Call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. Please take the roll.
President Alvarado.
I am here.
Vice President Sedith.
Yeah.
Director Stanley.
Yes.
Director Weiner.
Aquí.
Director Cepeda.
Here.
Okay.
Next item, please.
Item 2, approval of agenda order.
Okay. What is the will of the body? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Can I have a second, please? Second, please, on the agenda.
Yes.
We have a first and a second. Please take the roll.
President Alvarado.
Yes.
Vice President Sedith.
Yes.
Director Stanley. Director Stanley? Can she hear us? Director Stanley, are you there?
She was having some phone issues.
Why don't you go back to her?
Okay. Director Weiner.
Yes.
Director Cepeda.
Yes.
Okay. Director Stanley?
Yes.
Great. Motion passes.
Next item, please.
Item 3, public comment.
Do we have any members of the public?
I don't know of anybody.
I had nobody.
So we do not.
All right.
Okay, so next item, please.
Item 4, information report. 4A, receive update from ad hoc committee on request for proposal process for general legal services.
All right, before we get started on this, I want to ask the acting general counsel to just give us a lowdown on what we're discussing here tonight.
Sure. So everyone was provided with the agenda packet for this meeting last Friday. The agenda packet contained an update from the ad hoc committee on the RFP and the hiring process for the general legal services contract. The purpose of this meeting is to review that update and discuss the update as you may want to discuss it.
All right, is everybody clear on that? All right, so we're going to start as we usually go around the room, and we'll start with Director Stanley first. Please, comments, questions?
Well, I have a question and I have a comment.
Okay, go right ahead.
My question is I don't understand why the ad hoc committee thought they had authority to send out an RFP, because my expectation was that the ad hoc would go develop a process and then come back to the board for approval. So I would like to understand that. And then my comment is I would like the board to be exclusive in reviewing the proposals, and I would like our decision making to be insulated from staff, and for the board to be the sole filter of all 6 proposals submitted from start to finish. That's the end of my comment.
Okay. Attorney Lisa, would you like to take the first question?
I think that's something for you and Director Sedith to respond to Director Stanley about. I think she has a different expectation of what the ad hoc committee would do, and her question is probably best answered by the committee itself, which I wasn't on. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, no problem. VP Setup, would you like to comment before I comment?
It's fine. You can speak.
Let me hear your response.
I will say this. Ad hoc committee was. I think we should take a look at what the ad hoc committee was. What the board authorized the ad hoc committee to do. Number one, and number two, we should clear that the ad hoc not issue, so to speak, the
I can't hear. I can't hear.
It's a little hard to hear you, Director Suddeth. You're going in and out a little bit.
So, as I said, I do believe that we should probably take a look at what the ad hoc committee was. What the board established the ad hoc committee to do. And further, that I think that the misunderstanding here is that the RFP is not technically issued necessarily by the ad hoc committee, but by the district.
What was that last part?
The RFP is being issued by the district, not the ad hoc committee.
Is that it, Vice President Sutter?
Yes.
Okay. So let me chime in here. First of all, when we first started this process, I formed an ad hoc to do an RFP on legal services. That ad hoc was comprised of Vice President Sutter and Director Cepeda. They then came back to the board with their suggestions. From their suggestions, I, as president of the board, suggested we have an ad hoc committee to prepare and do an RFP for legal services. The board traditionally has ad hoc services to do these types of things so that the board and the ad hoc committee has more leeway than the entire board, because the ad hoc committee is not under the Brown Act rules regulations. Am I correct, Attorney Lisa?
That's not a public meeting when you meet, correct?
Okay, thank you. So the reason we formed an ad hoc was to move this process along. So on that committee, I named myself and I named Director Sutter. And this process could not be complete if we didn't have staff assisting us, because the truth of the matter is that the general counsel is not the board attorney. The general counsel works for the district. And the general counsel is probably going to be working with the staff's leadership team about 80% of the time, and with the board about 20% of the time. Now, the truth is that the board hires the general counsel. That's their job. So ultimately, we hire and fire two people, the general counsel and the general manager. So in order for us to take on this project, there's no way we can do it without our staff, especially the leadership team, who's going to be working primarily with the attorney. So to say that you want the board to be exclusive and not include the leadership team is not realistic. It's not something we've ever done before, and it's not something that I want to set a precedent of doing. Now, those are my answers. That's my statement. Now, Director Stanley, you can comment.
Well, seeing as an attorney has not been hired in 40 years, I fail to see how you would know anything, because none of us were around 40 years ago. But it's always been my understanding since I became a director that the board hires and fires the GM and hires and fires the attorney, and it was never a group thing. So the fact that you believe now President Alvarado, that it's a group thing, is new. That's the thing that is new. And so the expectations that I had was that there was no filtering going on. There was no, well, we'll pick our top so many choices and then we'll send it to you and you can take it from there. No, we hire, period. So your assertion that the staff needs to be involved, I think defeats the whole purpose of the board hires. It's not the board and staff hires. So I'm taken aback, and I'm wondering why we never had a discussion about it. If this is your position and it's a new position for this board, you can't unilaterally decide something. So perhaps the whole board would have supported that, but we never even discussed it. So I'm surprised.
Director Stanley, I will say this to you. First of all, I'm surprised that you're surprised, because I never once mentioned that the executive leadership team is going to be hiring anyone or interviewing anyone. If you read the report that you were sent, it says that all they're doing is screening and making sure that the 6 respondents, first of all, complied with the process. And this is, don't interrupt me, I didn't interrupt you. Comply with the process, and then the process will be sent back to the board with 3 respondents that they thought were the best ones. For you to sit there and say that the actual leadership team should not be involved, to me, is mystifying. And also for putting words in my mouth, which I never said staff was going to be involved in hiring or interviewing any of the respondents. That's not their job. Their job is to screen, because that is their expertise, number one. Number two, they're going to be dealing with the general counsel 80% of the time. So for you to say that they shouldn't be involved whatsoever is not realistic. And as far as us having an attorney for 40 years, shame on us. We shouldn't have had an attorney for 40 years. This process has been reviewed every 5 years, and it didn't. But go ahead, Vice President Seneff, I know you're chomping at the bit to respond, so go ahead.
Well,
Okay, so let me clear up something. Let me just clear up something.
You'll be able to respond in a minute. You wanted answers, we're trying to give them to you. Vice President Seneff, go ahead.
Let me clear up a couple of things. This is not the first ad hoc committee that we've had. We've had several. And when we have the ad hoc committee establishes the process by which it's going to operate and whatever they've been charged with. And then they bring that back to the board and advise the board on what they're going to do. These particular committees establish those processes and advising the board on what we're going to do. So I think that this communication is what we're talking about in this particular case. This RFP had very particular parameters by which the respondents need to add to make sure that they are, one, responsive to the needs of the district, the minimum qualifications, the background, the requirements that must be met to make them, one, responsive, and two, responsible in order to qualify to go to the next level of review. That is what the staff is looking for. They're not looking to say this is who the board should hire. They're looking to say these are your responsible and responsive respondents to, and offerers, I should say, to the RFP that was released. Of those firms or individuals, the recommendations to the board will be the top rankers who the ad hoc committee will put forth. The board will have access, which the board has just been given, to all offerers or respondents to the RFP. Now, the board will see all of those, but the board will be given the top ranking people based on the criteria that was listed forth in the RFP and the evaluation criteria that we have determined is in the best interest of the board. This is standard practice. This is nothing new. This is nothing that is not being used, whether we are choosing an engineering firm, we are choosing an accounting firm, we are choosing an HR firm. This is the practice when you issue an RFP. The fact that we are choosing the district council is why it has been elevated to the board rather than staying within the purview of our leadership team. President Alvarado is correct in that we have to seek the advice of our leadership team. In reality, we should not just only be seeking the advice of the leadership team, meaning the executive, but also we should be seeking the advice if the board wanted to give the very best possible candidate in a firm or an individual. We should actually be seeking the advice of all leaders in the district, including union leadership from all of the unions, and anyone who we deem this district council would be representing. And I'm saying that from my own experience, because the subject matter experts in this district are the ones who should be weighing in on the decision about the district council. Where I think the miscommunication has happened in many years, not just now, is in believing that this council only represents the board. And to think that only the board should be weighing in on this council is a mistake and a misnomer. This is district council, not board council. The job description, the description in the RFP, if one would take a moment to read it, clearly states that this firm or this individual is going to be representing the entire district. So the subject matter experts are these SMEs who should be involved in this process are those who will be weighing in on this. It's not one individual, it's not one board member, it is a collective. And that collective voice speaks for the entire district, including the community for which this district is responsible. So I think we need to take a step back, and maybe everybody can take a collective respira, breath, and think about what it is that we've been called to do in order to fulfill this obligation that we have. It's the same obligation that we have had when we were fulfilling the role of the general manager. And it's not that one person or one group was responsible for making that decision. We listened to the voice of the workforce and the unions, and we listened to the voice of whoever was left of the management team at that time, and we listened to the voice of the community. And I would just ask that all of us take a moment and think just as intentional about these decisions we did then. Not emotional, but intentional about the job that we have in front of us. As a person on this ad hoc committee, that is the charge that I heard when I was put on this committee, and that is the charge that I take now. We bring forth the top people, and as we look at all of the respondents that are being brought to the board. The last thing that I will say to you is that this is not a process that is rooted in anything subjective. This is all an objective process. We will be looking, when you want to, if you want to talk subjective, there will be an opportunity to interview when it comes to the board, when we get to the top three. If anyone sees anything otherwise that you want to see after we look at the scores, based on evaluation criteria, I would say weigh in at that point. But I do say I would ask for you to at least trust the process of the individuals who we are trusting these hundreds of millions of dollars of our district and public monies. We are trusting them day by day to run this district. I do believe that we should at least trust their expertise in giving us their feedback on what is needed for this district. I don't think that this is the time for us to stop trusting them to give us some kind of feedback on this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Sutter. Director Stanley, rebuttal, questions, comments?
So, Director Suddeth, I had a really hard time hearing you. Mostly got what you said, not all of it. Something's happening when at your speaker, and I'm getting a lot of static. That said, I did mostly understand what you were saying. I very much appreciate your tone and your explanation. I hope in the future that when we have ad hoc committees, that the ad hoc committees come before the board for one more okay before something is done. That said, thank you very much for your explanation. And President Alvarado, I was not confrontational, and I'm tired of every single board meeting of you jumping down my throat. I feel harassed and I feel bullied. Absolutely 100%. And I'm tired of it. It's upsetting to me. I'm here to do a job, and you're mean to me. And it's causing me to be ill, and it's caused me to it's affecting my health. And so I would like for you to keep that in mind in the future. And I don't like being the first person called. I would like to be called when I raise my hand and I have something to say. And so if you could please try to tone down your responses to me. I did not in any way insult anyone or harass anyone, and I don't appreciate your behavior towards me.
Director Stanley, we hear you. I know this is a hard meeting and we're covering a lot of hard ground. You are free to follow up with me on that. If you can, I'd really like us to focus on this really important topic for the rest of this meeting. I know there's a lot of different dynamics. And one thing I just want to tell you, board, is that staff and myself will try and we'll just try and improve how items are worded on agendas, and so we can try and just make sure we can eliminate any misunderstandings at that level. Okay, so I'm hearing some input, and I'll work with staff on that.
Thank you, Attorney Lisa. As far as Director Stanley, I'm not going to make a comment on most of what she said because I don't believe that that's the way I handle meetings. I handle meetings in decorum. I'm not going to let our meetings go out of way, and I'm not going to let anybody misstate or misrepresent what I'm saying. So, having said that, Director Weiner, questions, comments?
Yes, I had a couple questions, but I think they've been answered. But I do have a comment.
Sure.
And it's along the lines of what Director Stanley said. The board passed a motion to establish an ad hoc committee to develop a request for proposal process. The RFP process was developed as per the motion, but the ad hoc committee is implementing the process without consultation with the entire board. I don't see this as following good governance or convention. It seems to me that the ad hoc committee is acting beyond its stated scope and has not sought board authority to do so. And I don't think that we should continue the ad hoc committee's work until the board has approved the process. At such time, the board should find how we're going to continue the process. This is not a question of the process. This is a question of how we do business. And I feel that the board was not given the opportunity to review the process before it was implemented. And I don't think the ad hoc committee was given the authority to do so. That's my comment.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Attorney Lisa, would you like to comment?
I'd like to, let's continue hearing from the board, and I have some general thoughts.
Okay. Director Spada.
I have nothing else to add other than I would like to hear the responses of the questions that have already been asked, but I have no comments so far.
Is there a particular question that you did not get answered, Director Spada?
No, I'm just listening. I want to see the response to Harry's too, but I have no additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Director Spada. Vice President Sutter?
No, sir.
All right. All I have to say is that my comments are this. I mean, when the board establishes ad hoc committees, the ad hoc committee is the one who does the work and then brings it back to the board for approval at the end. So I believe that the ad hoc committee that was formed to do this RFP process has not overstepped any bounds whatsoever. I think we did what people wanted us to do. And at the end of the day, the ad hoc committee is not selecting the actual general counsel. That's going to be done by the board. And I've also expressed in the ad hoc committees that I believe that if the board wants to interview all 6 respondents, we should interview all 6 respondents. As long as they meet the scoring criteria that Vice President Sutter spoke of before. I have no problems or issues with that. I'm not trying to be more than I am. My job is to run the meetings, to make sure that we have decorum and make sure we stick to the subject. So if any board member thinks that I'm bullying them or belittling them, that's not my job. However, I'm not going to sit here and listen to people's, taking my words and putting them out of context. So if they believe that that's bullying, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. But at the end of the day, I've been doing public service now for over 30 years. So I've been through this is not my first rodeo. I've been here doing this for a while. And I'll continue, as long as I'm president, to run the meetings as I've run them. And like I said, if someone thinks that I offended them whatsoever, I apologize. That is not my goal. My goal is to make sure that the meetings run in a right decorum order. So on that note, I'm going to give it back to Attorney Lisa, and please give me any thoughts you may have.
So my general thought is this. We have 2 directors that are comfortable with the process that was set up by the ad hoc committee. We have 2 directors who are not comfortable with the process set up by the ad hoc committee. I don't think that the committee necessarily exceeded its authority. I think they did set up a process for the board to select general counsel. To the extent board members don't like the process that was set up, a majority of the board acting in open session can influence that. And at this point, my big picture concern is, let's hire one of these excellent firms to be your general counsel. We have a process that maybe you don't like, maybe it could be improved, maybe there are some tweaks everyone could suggest what they would like to see differently. But I think it's a good process. I think this process that's been set up is kind of acting like a funnel. So you'll get the very best to talk to. However, if we need to change course and have a different process, that's possible, but a collective majority of the board will have to figure out how to do that, and it likely will take time to do that, which will likely delay hiring one of these firms, which is not a good thing. there are various options, but I don't know, I can't tell how things might be improved by what we've discussed today. And if the starting point is this ad hoc committee didn't have the authority to create this process, well, that's one thing. But is the process that they created something everyone can buy into is another thing. Are there tweaks that would make it better for this board to timely retain a new permanent general counsel? I think if you have those suggestions, then you should share them so that input can be received from your colleagues. And if the issue is that you thought there would be a formal policy created by the ad hoc committee that would come before the board before the process begins, that you could also articulate, because we can constructively do something with that. But I guess what I want to say is, if there are other points that you want to make, now is the time, because this process is set to begin as in the form that you were updated. And I don't see anything bad about the process. I think it's perfectly fine for staff to do the initial screen and make sure that the proposals submitted fulfill the criteria, and then have the ad hoc committee further refine and curate who the board interviews. Maybe it could be improved. Maybe the process could be improved. I'm sure that the members of the ad hoc committee are open to input on that.
Is that it? Attorney Lisa?
That's the end of my comments, but I still think, I mean, is the board done receiving this update and discussing it?
No, I'm going to give board members one more time, one more go around.
Very good.
As I normally do. You know, I'm not taking any raised hands or anything. I'm going to go the process like I normally do it. Director Stanley?
President Alvarado, I don't wish to be called first anymore, but you just called me, so I'm going to answer. But I hope in the future that you will stop calling me first. From what I was able to hear from Vice President Sutter, I trust that she did a professional job, and I trust what she said. I don't want to delay this process anymore. I'm hoping that our board, whenever we get around to discussing policies, will, when we get to ad hocs, that we will agree to discuss this topic of how the procedures of how ad hocs work and whether or not they come back to the board for approvals at that time. But right now, I would like to move forward, and I'm resigned to the fact that that it's counterproductive to complain at this late date. I'm done.
All set. Director Weiner?
Okay. What I said was that we needed to approve the process before it was implemented as a board, just to summarize. And I believe that Lisa expressed that was possible to do. And if we accept your report, that would mean that we accept the process. But we never had a formal vote on the process. And I believe that that was the way we should have proceeded. And so my issue is not with the process that you came up with, but how it went from being a process to report to the board to actually being implemented and being done. And the board never had a chance to approve or disapprove of it. And that is what my issue is, that it should have come before the board as a report, which it did last time, but we never had a chance to approve or disapprove it. And there was additions in this report that were not on the last report. More details, etc. So that my issue is we never got to approve it, not that it's not a good procedure. Also, there was an alternative procedure. That alternative was to hire an independent firm to run the show. And that is also something that we did for our GM. So it's not just this way or another way. There are many ways for the board to accomplish this. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Spada.
Yeah, I have one question. I don't know if we're able to add this to the process, so thank you both for working on this process. Reading the items here, I see that we can present 2 questions, and those questions, from what I'm reading here, if I understand it correctly, they're to be generic enough because it's going to be asked of all the finalists. Is there a way to be able to ask them something specific to their responses in their proposal, as opposed to just generic? Because if it's generic, we got to ask them everybody else, you know, what's your favorite color? Everybody answers that. But if I want to know specific something that they put in their presentation, I don't see that on there. And I'm wondering if we can either add it, or what can we do to question something within their proposal?
Lisa, you want to take that?
Sure. I don't see a legal issue with that. However, I think that based on what we're doing today, I think that the members of the ad hoc committee have heard your point and will address it in the committee.
I have one response to that, Director Cepeda. I want you to read the bullet before the end bullet. It says, following each finalist presentation, the director's pre-submitted questions will be asked, okay? Directly after the presenter responds to a director's question, the director that submitted the question will have the opportunity to ask one follow-up question in response to the presenter's answer to the original question. So that means, in my reading of this, is that if they have a question, you know, if they answer your question and you still have a question about their answer, you can ask that follow-up question. That's in there.
Yeah, I think Director Cepeda is saying, can there be a non-standardized question asked that's firm specific?
Is that what you're asking, Director Cepeda?
Correct. Yeah, because if we'll submit 2 questions that are standard for all the people that we're going to be interviewing, right? But maybe there might be one proposal that is saying, and I haven't read them all yet, but maybe there's one proposal that says something in there that just doesn't, we just have a question about it.
Okay.
But we don't want to ask that question of everybody else because it only pertains to that one proposal. Can we ask that question? And it's not a follow-up question, right? It's a,
so
there might not be. I'm just, you know, it could potentially be that everybody gets the same and we're all good to go. I haven't had a chance to read all of them yet.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Ms. Lisa, can I respond? The reason that you don't do that during this open phase of procurement is that everything has to be published. And so you cannot treat one offerer different than you treat another offerer. So you cannot pick out one offerer and ask a question or answer a question other than another. Everything has to be published. So you cannot ask Director Weiner a question that you do not ask Director Alvarado, or you cannot ask Director Stanley something that you do not ask Director Cepeda. Everything has to be open And everything has to be, and even if you publish an answer, the answers have to be published. That is the way that you do open and fair competition. So you cannot be specific to one offerer.
Thank you, Director.
Even when you're interviewing, you have to keep it very narrowly focused on the high level questioning that is specific to the district.
Thank you, Director. Vice President Sutter. Mr. Chair, may I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure, go right ahead.
So if we have questions, and again, I might not have any questions. I've been browsing through the proposals, and there's a lot of pages, but if there is the process then, instead of asking them at the time of the interview, should we send it over to the committee and the committee can maybe get some clarification? Is that the process?
That's a great question, Dr. Zepeda. Let's ask the attorney for clarification on that.
Okay. Dr. Zepeda, can you ask your question again? I was writing something down.
Yeah, so it's still the same question. I'm just trying to figure out. So, and I agree with Vice President Sutter that if the questions should be the same for everybody, but if we still have a clarifying question, can we then ask it to the committee, and the committee gets us some clarification before we make the decision on the final person or whatever? Just browsing through one proposal, for example, and I've only looked at two very quickly. One of them is talking about their diversity. I haven't seen that page yet on the other one, so maybe I have a question about that portion, right? And maybe it could be that I just haven't gotten to that page yet. And once I do, I won't have that question. But if I still find something that one proposal mentioned that the other ones didn't, that I think we maybe want to just get clarification, can we put that out there to the committee to just confirm?
So what I would say is that there are some details about this process that have not been finalized. And at this point, I don't believe that we have to prohibit follow-up questions after the interviews that the board does. So let us take a look, let the ad hoc committee take a look and see if your comments can be incorporated into the kind of some of the details that have yet to be worked out.
Yeah, and I would say, to answer your question, is that, again, it would have to be a question that would have to be asked of anybody. You can't just ask it of one. So if you ask that question, you would ask of all four. So if the question is, what is your policy for diversity, or what is your diversity and inclusion policy, you would ask of all four. And even if it's only in one, still would ask all four. And all you would do is you would publish it. You would publicly publish it as an addendum to the RFP. You would publish it, and everybody would have an opportunity to answer it. Even if one has already answered it, the legal way to do it is you would publish it, and everybody would have an opportunity to answer. Even the one who's already answered, they may have a better way of answering it than they already submitted.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
We'll run this issue to ground.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But, yeah.
All right.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go around one more time. I have one question. This is not asking for approval. This is just asking for your opinion. What's the opinion of the board on interviewing 5 of the respondents? Director Stanley, you first. Just that question. No other.
Well, I want to interview all 6, so I don't know how to say that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate your response. Director Weiner.
Same. I'd like to interview them all.
Okay. Director Zepeda.
Because we're short on time, I would go with, I'm thinking that you guys have already done the legwork and you've already looked at all 6 proposals, and there's one that really doesn't match because maybe they don't have any legal people here in the Bay Area or whatever it may be. I would take your recommendation.
Substance of any proposal.
Oops, say that again, Lisa. You got cut off there.
Let's not go into the substance of any proposal.
Okay. Yeah, I was just being generic enough. Yes, I would go with 5. I'm fine with that.
Vice President Sutter?
I say we go with the recommendation of the committee.
I say as well, but this is a board and the majority rules, so we will take all your answers in recognition and see where we're going from there at the next. We're going to have at least one more ad hoc to discuss the choices, and then I'll get back to all of you and let you know what the result is.
I do want to flag something for everybody.
Sure.
If the goal is to have a contract in place in September, it's likely that the board interviews are going to have to happen before September 16.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I want to flag that for everyone because I know this is a time off period.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think we've already discussed that at ad hoc, and we realized that we definitely have to have a special meeting in order to do this. So, yeah, we'll do what it takes to make it happen. But thank you. Nothing further. Next item, please.
Next item, adjournment.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
All right. You take care now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.